So the word nurse comes from the Latin word nutrere, which means to suckle, as in a baby suckling on a breast. As a result, nursing started as a female family responsibility, as nurses were expected to run homes. Since they were home, they were expected to be taking care of their sick family members. However, none of them had any formal training, and as a result, they did what they thought was best, and majority of the time it wasn't as beneficial to the patients because of the conditions that they were being nursed in. During the 16th century, nursing duties were taken over by Catholic churches and nuns because of the theology that says faith accompanied by good works were the route to heaven. However, Protestant reformers rejected this notion because of two reasons. One, rich men could not gain God's grace through paying charitable institutions and paying a lot of money to these churches. And secondly, they didn't agree with the notion that poor patients were suffering as a way of them to gain salvation. As a result, majority of these Catholic churches were shut down by Protestant reformers. However, local officials saw the benefit of having these public hospitals. As a result, most of these hospitals were continued in Protestant lands without the control of nuns or churches, and it became a government thing. During the 18th century, there were a lot of wars, and thus most patients were soldiers. Florence Nightingale gained popularity during the Crimean War in the 1850s. She was a nurse from a wealthy and liberal family. She reorganized the care of wounded soldiers by insisting that the conditions the soldiers were in was killing them, and insisted that clean linen, bandages, fresh air, good nutrition, and trained carers were needed to improve the outcome of these soldiers. Nightingale also changed how nursing was viewed during this time. The nursing of strangers was not seen as a respectable career for well-bred ladies who, if they wished to nurse, they were only to do it for sick family members and intimate friends. In a departure from these views, Nightingale believed that well-educated women using scientific skills and informed education about healthy lifestyles could provide the best nursing care for sick patients. She also believed that training nurses would provide an ideal calling full of intellectual potential and social freedom, since they had very few career options during that time. She also believed that nursing required a special type of person. I quote, "Nursing is an art, and if it is to be made an art, it requires an exclusive devotion as hard a preparation as any painter's or sculptor's work. For what is there having to do with dead canvas or dead marble, compared with having to do with a living body, the temple of God's Spirit? It is one of the fine arts." I had almost said, the fine of fine arts. The British government asked Nightingale to take a small group of nurses to the military hospital at Scutari, modern-day Turkey. Within days of their arrival, Nightingale and her nurses had reorganized the barracks hospital in accordance with the 19th century science. Walls were scrubbed for sanitation, windows opened for ventilation, nourishing food prepared and served, and medications and treatment efficiently administered. Within weeks, death rates plummeted, and soldiers were no longer sickened by infectious diseases arriving from poor sanitary conditions. Within months, a grateful public knew of the work of the Lady with the Lamp, who made nightly rounds comforting the sick and wounded. By the end of the 19th century, the entire Western world shared Nightingale's belief in the worth of educated nurses. As urbanization and industrialization increased, those without family members to nurse them at home found themselves in hospital. However, the problem with these hospitals is that the care that they provided was very different. In one hospital, you could find excellent hospital care, but in another hospital, it was deplorable and horrible. As a result, this became a huge problem in the 19th century, especially as the development of hospital-based nursing care was increasing. As a result, the convergence of the hospital's needs to have some uniformity in their nursing care, the physician's wishes to have competent nurses, and the woman's desire to have meaningful work, this resulted in a new healthcare professional being created, the trained nurse. As a result, hospitals started their own nursing training schools. In exchange for lectures and clinical instructions, students provided these hospitals with 2 or 3 years free trained nursing services. However, this hospital-based education model created a number of problems. One, it bound the training of nurses into hospitals and not colleges, and this tie was not broken until the late 20th century. Number two, this whole hospital-based training model, it created a lot of segregation among nurses. For example, African American students could not study at an African American hospital because of their skin color. They had to find a hospital-based training school that was founded by an African American, and as a result, this whole segregation became a problem. The third thing is it further increased the stereotyping that nursing was a woman's work and it was an extension of a domestic work, and very few training schools provided spaces for men. Still, nurses transformed hospitals. In addition to the skilled, compassionate care they gave to patients, they established an orderly and routine, systemized environment within which patients healed. They administered increasingly complicated treatments and medication regimes. They maintained the aseptic and infection control protocols that allowed more complex and invasive surgeries to proceed. In addition, they experimented with different models of nursing interventions that humanized increasingly technical and impersonal medical procedures. Moving to a South African context, please note that I'm only taking a small part of the history of South Africa, and most of my information is through the history of the Wits University. If you'd like more information, please go ahead and read the book called The History of the Development of Nursing in South Africa by Searle Charlotte. She goes more in depth with the whole history. I'm just giving you a brief snippet of it. The story starts when Sister Henrietta Stockdale, the daughter of an Anglican clergyman in Nottinghamshire, England, grew up in a cultured atmosphere enriched by a deep awareness of one's duty to the church, the cause of its mission, and the alleviation of suffering. She came to South Africa in 1874 as an associate of the Bloemfontein mission of the Anglican Church. She came to serve in the fields of education and nursing. For this purpose, she had received a classical education from her father, the vicar, and had undergone some training as a nurse. Sister Henrietta arrived in South Africa during a difficult period in its history. It was a pastoral one, and the discovery of diamonds in Kimberley brought an influx of people from all over the world trying to be fortune seekers and try to get rich. And as a result, there was a lot of things that were lacking. One, there was a lack of education facilities for women. Two, there was a lack of jobs. And three, there was a lack of health facilities in that area. Imagine having a lot of people coming to a specific area. Also, the women were filled with compassion, intrigue, initiative to try to get something started in that area, but because they had no one to lead them, Sister Henrietta took advantage of this and convinced the leaders in that area that for the economy to be able to continue growing and for their communities to strive, they needed to provide proper basic health facilities in those areas, and as a result, Sister Henrietta used this to create some form of nursing intervention. As the world during this period were aware of the importance of having trained nurses, Sister Henrietta started her own training school in Kimberley in 1877. From the 19th century to early 20th century, majority of the training of nurses was being done by religious orders and hospital-based training schools. And then in the late 20th century, it was being done by a patchwork of institutions that were differing in size and standards. There were private organizations that were doing it for a profit. Some were subsidized and some were state-owned, but there was no coordinated pattern among them. It was not until the late 1930s that nursing training actually entered into universities, and it should be another decade before nursing training would be done with any form of university. So each institution was doing what they thought was best, depending on the number of skills and trained tutors that you had. Universities were reluctant to see nursing added to their choices of professional programs. Although not overtly stated, it seemed that one of the reasons for this was that nursing in South Africa, like in much of the rest of the world, was considered an extension of a woman's domestic labor. This was something that was acceptable in the hospital setting where education was tied to service, but not something that was to be offered in an academic setting such as a university, which was still very male-dominated in the interwar years. Searle wrote in her book, "At first, the universities considered that nursing was not a fit subject for university study, but in time, as faculties of commerce and departments of social and domestic science were added, the nurses were quick to point out that the attitude of the universities was inconsistent and that nursing was at least as important to the community as bookkeeping and domestic science, and that it was in fact part of medical science." One of the external factors that led to the expansion of education of nursing in South Africa was a lack of education and training opportunities in South Africa, especially for sister tutors. So sister tutors would be equivalent to your lecturers. During the 20th century, majority of the sister tutors that were there during that time were either coming from foreign countries such as the UK, or there'd be the few South African nurses that were able to afford to go overseas to get trained as sister tutors and educators, and then come back into the country to educate more nurses. However, this was highly ideal because of the high influx of students wanting to study nursing but having very few sister tutors. And majority of the time what they would do is you'd have a matron or a ward sister, and they would be expected to train nursing students, and this was highly ideal because imagine you're a ward sister, you've got a lot of work to do, but you also need to educate other students so that they actually become competent nurses and trained nurses and all of that jazz. As a result, this was one of the pressures that allowed for nursing to be able to evolve because of these shortage of sister tutors that they had. For the country to have an increase in the number of nursing tutors that they had, they needed external support. The major two members that helped into this whole thing is renowned professors from the Medical School of Wits, which was Raymond and Philip Tobias. In 1935, with the joint efforts of Mr. Raymond and SAMDC and SATNA, it was decided that they would create a post-basic diploma which would be taught at Wits and UCT. It was in the medium of English. It was initially a 2-year part-time post-basic course, but was soon converted to a 1-year full-time diploma in nursing education, and the first 6 graduates to receive their diplomas when it was in March 1939. As a result of this formulation of this diploma, it was an important point in history of nursing being recognized as an actual profession, and this course was open to both black and white students. However, for black students, there are a few problems. The first one was you needed a matric certificate and post-basic and 2 years of post-basic experience. However, because of the Bantu education, not many black students were able to meet those qualifications. Another thing, because of the Bantu Education Act number 45 of 1959, for a black student to be admitted to a university, they needed to get ministerial permission, which was both hard to get and very tedious work. So it was only in November 1985 that Mr. Andrew Chiliwan to be the first black student to receive a Bachelor of Nursing in Nursing course at the University of Wits, which was a 4-year degree. Another problem that nursing had for it to be recognized as an actual profession in South Africa is when it initially started, it was being governed under the SAMDC, which is the South African Medical and Dental Council. And as a result, nurses felt they were not being properly represented on this council because it mostly had to do with medical students. And as a result, nurses felt that they needed to have their own statutory board that would govern their nursing education, examinations, and all of that jazz. So it was only in 1944 that the South African Nursing Council came into being through Act number 45 of 1944. For the nursing administration in this period of high apartheid, the training of white Afrikaans-speaking nurses took priority. They were the first group to be offered basic nursing training at a university level, which was initially a Bachelor of Arts in Nursing, which was offered at the University of Pretoria since 1955, the University of Stellenbosch, and the University of Orange Free State, also offering Afrikaans medium courses, were not far behind. The first of the English medium universities to begin basic nursing training within a university setting was the University of Cape Town. Shortly thereafter, in 1962, Natal also began to offer an English medium course. Wits lagged behind and only began its basic training program in 1969. Significantly, when Wits introduced its new program, it was a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, the first of its kind in South Africa. This was the forerunner to the degree that is today known as the Bachelor of Nursing. So as you know, nursing started as a hospital-based training thing because nursing was mostly seen as a service, and as a result, those that were being trained within the university setups were also now expected to have some form of service training because the whole profession had everything to do with service. So students that were studying at the Wits University were expected to work 40 days compared to the 4,000 hours we expected. They were expected to work 40 days, which was done during the holidays and sometimes in the afternoon, so it wasn't a full day. And then also, guys, guess what? They were being paid 100 rand a month. I know it sounds very little compared to our times now, but that was a lot. So imagine you're being paid 100 rand every month, and your accommodation was 272 for lodging and the food, and then you could also pay your education from that. So they were getting paid quite a lot of money. So please, nursing council, please bring this back. Like, you can take everything else out, but please just bring this part of nursing history back. So in June 1982, the National Department of Health and Welfare made nursing education in a university a must, and as a result, from 1985 onwards, universities had to offer nursing as one of their courses, and this was passed through the SANG regulation R425. 1994 heralded a new era in South Africa, not only in the political arena but also in the healthcare system. So during this time, WITS was introducing a new curriculum. They were also moving from a post-basic learning to a more primary healthcare approach, or community-based learning, and this was through the ANC's policies that were passing through, as they were the main political party during that time. So this historical overview, using WITS as a case study to sort of see what was happening in South Africa and the whole formulation of nursing in South Africa, I'm hoping it has provided you and it has allowed you to see the history of nursing in South Africa. But the main reason why I use WITS as a case study is that it allowed us to see two main factors that were allowing nursing to continue being put forward and for it to grow as quickly as it did. One, the nurses themselves felt that they needed recognition of being a whole profession and not just being a community service based type of thing. And also the medical profession and the universities themselves saw advantages of integrating nursing into the university setup and having competent nurses in the medical field. As a result, the worldwide and the medical profession itself saw the benefit of having trained nurses, and as a result of all these external forces, it allowed nursing to be able to come to fruition in the way that it has. Obviously, we're not where exactly we need to be within a South African context, but I'm just hoping that from you seeing how far we have come and where we are now, just to see how we are progressing. I know the progress is slow compared to where we were like in 1998. We were already 10 years, 12 years after that. But it's just to help you to see where we've come from, and so that you understand when SANG makes certain rules or when SANG is moving towards a certain direction, we understand where we're coming from and how things were outdated and that sort of thing, and how we're just moving with modern times. And it's a good thing that all these policies change, especially moving from regulation 425 to regulation 174 and all of that jazz. It's just to show you that, nursing is an ever evolving career, and as a result, for you to actually stay relevant in it, you constantly need to be updating your information about what you know, because nothing is ever constant. Things that we knew 10 years ago are different now. So I'm just hoping this video has inspired you as a nursing student to be able to use what the nursing profession and the nursing council are doing as a way to motivate yourself to continue learning about the profession itself, because you're entering into it and you need to know what is up. This was definitely one of the hardest videos I've ever had to record, because it's not something where I could just ramble and talk about how I'm feeling, what my thoughts are and that sort of thing. It was more of I had to stick to the facts and stick to the script and that sort of thing. So I really hope you guys enjoyed. Please show this video so much love, give it all those thumbs up. It will really show that you guys enjoy this video and the effort I actually put into it. But yeah, until next week Friday, where I'm going to be talking about the history of nursing uniform. That video is sweet and short, but it's just to show you how far we've come from and how come we have all these exciting nursing uniforms that we have. I'm definitely gonna be in the same outfit because I'm recording it now, but anyway, it's next week's video. Bye guys.